areas that we'll have, and the first one we'll call header, and then underneath the header let's put a menu div, and under that we'll put what we'll call a breadcrumbs div, and then under that we'll put a content div, and we'll just put that, the ASP content placeholder, inside of that. Let me just reformat this so we get a nice look at it. Now I'm just going to add a cascading style sheet so we have a little formatting for our site when we look at these navigation controls. And I will add a new theme, call it default. And within the theme I'm going to add a cascading style sheet, also called default. And I'm going to paste in some styles I've made up previously, and that looks good. So now let's go back over to our master page, and we'll start to add a few elements in here, or rather controls I should say. And what we want to add, the first thing is over here, and it's called a sitemap data source, and this is similar to the SQL data source, object data source, etc., and it's designed to work specifically with sitemaps. So we'll take that and put that up here. Now since we're using the standard web.sitemap file, we don't have to specify anything else to set up our sitemap data source. By default it automatically will use that file. And so now let's go down here, and what we want to add first is our menu. So we'll go over here to navigation tab, and you can see we have several options here. We're going to take a menu control and put it here in our menu div. Let's get rid of the toolbox, and now let's look at how we set up this menu control to use our sitemap. So the first thing we have to do to enable our menu with the sitemap is go over here, and we need to set the data source ID, and we'll set that equal to the ID of the sitemap data source, and we'll just use the default name there. So we have our menu control attached to our data source. Let's start up the default page and see what we have at this point. And we do have some navigation here in place with the menu, and as you can see we get the different menu choices, and we can navigate to any one of the pages. We have our tooltips showing up. So if I go add customer, up here in the address bar you can see we're on the add customer page, and here we're back on the default ASPX page. Now let's go back and format this menu a little bit to look more like what we might want on our site. So we'll close down the browser window, and in our master page let's go into the design mode. Let's go up to our menu control and let's auto format it. We'll just give it a slightly different look here by applying that format to it. Now I want to set a property or two, so we'll go over to the properties window. And the one thing that I want to set initially is the orientation. It's currently on vertical, so let's set that to horizontal. And now let's start up the web page again and see what we have at this point. Okay, we have a color scheme here. There it is, and we still looks like we have this vertical menu. So let's see why that is the case. So that looked okay, but the problem is that we only have the home menu option showing, which is the root. We don't have customers and orders, which is really what we'd like here as well. So to do that we need to go down here to what's called the static display levels, and right now we're only showing one level, so we're getting just that top level, which is home. So let's change this to 2, and now we should get the additional choices here. And while we're at it, I'm just going to make a quick change to auto formatting. I don't really like the way that last one looks, so we'll change it to the classical look. So now let's start it up, and here's our page, and we should see a horizontal menu which we do, and it has all of our choices on it. So this is much more the way that we would like this to lay out on our page, a nice menu bar across the top. So the menu looks in good shape. Now let's move on to what's called the sitemap path. So switch back to the source view on our master page, and what we want to do next, as I said, is use what's called a sitemap path control. And you might know this by the name breadcrumbs as well. You've seen this probably many times on a site where it shows you kind of a list of the links that correspond to the pages that you visited as you navigate down into the site. So we'll go over to our toolbar, back to the navigation section, and in there's a sitemap path control. We'll take one of those and put it inside our breadcrumbs div. Now our sitemap path is automatically connected to our sitemap data source, which we've already added to the page. Let me just go over to the design view and do a quick auto format on this. We'll take colorful, and now let's fire up the page. And you can see with very little effort we now have our breadcrumbs here. If we go over, say, to add a customer, there it shows we're in add a customer. We have the link for customers, and also when we're on customers we can go back to home. And you should notice as we moved through the pages such as add a customer that we're keeping the menu and the sitemap because we're using master pages. So with very little effort we were able to have a nice set of breadcrumbs here on every one of our pages, which improves our navigation capabilities for the user. Now let's go on and take a quick look at how you can actually use the tree view control with the sitemap data source as well. So we can also use the tree view control in conjunction with our sitemap data source to display navigation in a tree format. Rather than put this in the master page where it would show up on every page, let's say we had one page, the add customer page, where we wanted to have that tree view navigation. So we'll go in here to the toolbox, down to navigation, take a tree view, put that here on our add customer page. We also need to connect it to the data source on the master page. So we'll say data source ID equals sitemap data source 1. So now we'll start up the website, and on our home page, no tree view because it's only on the add a customer page. Go to add a customer. There's our tree view with the regular navigation capabilities equal to what we have up here in the menu. So if we pick add order, we go over to the add orders page, back to home, add customers, and we show the tree view again. So that's the third control that works with the sitemap data source. Next thing we're going to look at is adding security to our sitemap, where we want to restrict access to certain pages in the site based upon the user's role. Now to do this we need ASP.NET membership installed, so I've gone ahead and done that, created a SQL Server database called Site Navigation, and then I installed the appropriate ASP.NET membership objects in that database by running the ASP.NET_RegSQL utility. Also went over to the web.config and I added the sections for the membership provider and the role provider. So the next thing we have to do is add a login page. So I'll create a folder for that, call it authentication, and we'll add a page and call the page login. Now on our login page we want to put a login control, so we'll get that from the toolbar, put that on our login page, and then we'll also on the home page put a login status control, and that will show whether or not we're logged in or log out and allow us to do login or log out based upon what the current setting is. Add that. So now we're ready to implement our security. And what we're going to use is called security trimming. And essentially what that does is it will trim specific nodes out of our sitemap based upon the role of the